Hello, my response is one, I'm correcting the table, which hopefully I will have the wisdom to use in the future. I've added a pain and suffering column, and I've improved the empathy column in that the question of when do animals feel empathy to me is in the emotions column, and I was intending to ask if they deserve empathy. I think the specific question of empathy as an emotion is very interesting and can be and should be ranked itself. Each of these columns really is worthy of a debate in itself. And indeed, subcategories within the columns probably also particular emotions, love, um, empathy. Suffering to me also an emotion, but I put it over there with pain in this new column. Now, I basically feel that some sense of each of these columns applies to all living things. But it's true that the language we use, some of these things cease to be. The one exception to that is rights, which I think are an arbitrary human or even legal construct. And the concept of rights do not necessarily apply generally, just as some humans can lose their rights. There are various reasons people may forfeit their rights. Now, in terms of emotions, I think it's obvious that humans and mammals that we share a lot of emotions, and basically all the emotions I think that you can find can be recognized in mammals. Now, in birds and reptiles, I still think that's the case. I think there are that they're more alien. The emotions we have in common is more likely that we feel them subjectively, possibly quite differently, and it becomes a subset. We're talking about an overlap. Now, uh, animals like birds, obviously have emotions related to their mating habits that we have lost, and so they can have a more rich life. If we wanted, we could have these ranks based on the evolutionary accomplishments of birds, but we're not. This is starting from humans, so I think it's pretty clear we have emotions. Now, emotions in insects and plants and single-celled life forms, well, that's not usually how people speak of emotion. But to me, I think that it's fundamentally going to be the case that any multi-celled creature, whatever its cooperative methodology, it's going to be something analogous to emotion. If it has a neural system, it's involved as well as hormonal releases. If it doesn't have a neural system, fine, then it's just through the hormonal releases. And to me, these are emotions, the creation of a perception, of a single perception of an atmospheric notion, instead of the much more complex and rich, set of facts that we have about that environment. That's basically the reduction into emotion. And I think all living things do that. They basically turn a very complex, real set of data into this notion that basically is what you would call an emotion. In my case, no matter what the living creature. Now, emotions as we understand them, I think those go down to insects. Insects feel distress and panic in a very small set, but still the set they have is recognizable as emotion. Plants and single celled creatures, not so much, at least not on the time scales that we see, and not emotions that we are concerned with primarily. Now, with thinking, again, I believe that all living things do activity that's analogous to thinking, and really what we're talking about is the time scale in which they do it. Single celled life forms do this thinking and planning and plotting type of behavior on a multi generational time scale. So, as individuals, I don't think that they do much thinking except for this component or elemental thinking that they contribute to a thought process that plays out over time. The same thing, with starfish, which are really, really slow and seem like really stupid, unthinking animals. Well, I've seen time lapse of them where you can see they're animals. They're behaving like animals. It's just that they do so really slow. The same way watching vines grow, plants behave in ways that look like animal behavior, but very, very slowly. And that's because their communication system is much more slow. But fundamentally, I don't see why you wouldn't want to call it thinking. Now, do they deserve empathy? To me, this uh, column is totally pointless. As the host of the debate, I put it up there because I think it's important to the question of rights. But socially, I personally don't think it relates directly to rights because I think anything can have empathy. A mountainside that's getting strip mined, even a dead one that had no life on it, you could have empathy because empathy is a human. I'm not saying it's solely human that other animals couldn't feel it, but I mean the empathy in this case is we're talking about the empathy we have for other creatures, and we can have empathy for anything that we want. It's a tool of human cognition. So, of course, every animal can have empathy. Now, does it deserve empathy? Yes, a certain amount of empathy. I think so. If you put yourself in their frame of mind. On the other hand, empathy of that sort for a smallpox vaccine, which has been stamped out of the earth, is not a reason to go ahead and give that vaccine rights and freedoms and things like this.
Okay.
Now, pain and suffering, I'm sure it was a Freudian type thing that I left this column out because, um, this is almost offensive, or it is offensive, the history of this particular concept. Um, Basically, only humans were thought to feel pain for a great part of the Christian era. Prior to that, of course, everybody knew that animals could feel pain. It's as obvious as the fucking sun coming up in the morning. In the case of mammals, birds, and reptiles, that fucking insects show signs of feeling pain. Now, we might not want to call that pain. As I said, I think in the opening, you could call it distress, a kind of an emotion. It might not be of any value for the insect evolutionarily to feel pain as we understand it. This debilitating must pay attention. They don't have enough time or any ability to do anything about that but to go on. So, granted, they probably don't feel the sharp pangs of pain type pain, but they feel a panic and a distress when they're damaged. And again, the language then doesn't serve us to call this pain in insects and plants and single celled life forms, but they all recoil and react to damage when they can sense it. And that's what pain basically is that it's biological systems for sensing damage to the system. Okay, so it's a somewhat arbitrary thing. It's cells that might be healthy and well fed and fine, and they have to feel distressed because some other part of the system is being damaged, not them. And this is pain is whatever the biological organism uses for that kind of communication. Now, the question of rights. I think all first four ranks here deserve rights in the human system, and that is to say, um, they deserve consideration from their point of view, what they might want. And if we can't communicate and get that, well, we can't do that in a lot of cases, but we could still try to figure it out. Now, insects, plants, and single celled creatures, I have to admit, I would love to say that they have rights, but to be brutally honest about it, I don't consider my environmental concerns for insects, plants, and single celled creatures to be born from rights or their rights. It's somewhat self centered. I believe we need a good biosphere. These all play roles. I appreciate and respect the living creatures. Insects are fascinating. Plants, obviously, crucial. Single celled life forms couldn't live without them, fundamental to our biosphere. So they're protected for those kinds of reasons rather than because of their rights. Okay. Similarly, it's obvious that as with children, the communication issues with mammals, birds, and reptiles, fish, um, I wonder if fish should go in there or not, but the that we are doing a caretaking kind of job. We have to figure out what the rights, and it gives a lesser rights. Rights are definitely augmented by the ability to communicate, since they're trying uh, to assert what you have as a fundamental ability to do for yourself. So if you can communicate what you yourself wants into the social context where the rights are an issue, yeah, that's going to help. So there's definitely a diminishing rights because humans culturally are going to be human centric in this kind of way. And we might respect not wiping out an animal and still not think of it in terms of rights. There's other ways to think of it. So, all right, so that's my answer and the new graph in a different color so that in the tree you'll be able to tell when I do the rounds. I'll use the same color. Okay, cheers.